Hey everybody, welcome back to the Brock Automotive channel. Today we're going to be doing an oil change and quick service on my 2016 Dodge Ram EcoDiesel. I know a lot of people's done oil changes before. It's a pretty simple task, but I'm doing this video, maybe folks that are young haven't done an oil change yet, give them some tips and tricks and show them the right way to do it. So let's get started. Okay, so now we're under the truck, obviously. One thing you want to make sure you do before you change your oil is get the oil up to operating temperature, or at least warm, okay? You want to do that to get all the oil warm, to get all the sludge down into the pan and into the filter. Oil flowing good. When it's warm, it's going to flow a lot better than when it's cold. Next step, pull the drain plug, get the oil draining. Make sure your drain pan is big enough for the amount of oil that's going to come out of the engine. This engine holds like 2.5 gallons, so 10.5 quarts. So just make sure that your drain pan is big enough. That wasn't too bad. I got splashed a little bit, but oil's still pretty clean. It's got like 5,200 miles on it, 5,200 miles on it. The factory recommended changes on these is a little bit longer than that. I think it's almost 10,000 or right in that neighborhood somewhere. I definitely don't want to run mine that long. I just got this truck. This is my first oil change on it, so I want to take it kind of conservative, change it earlier than what the factory says, and just kind of see where we're at and how it's going. Oil's still pretty clean, which is a little unusual, especially for a diesel. With 5,000 miles on it, normally a diesel will get the oil darkened up from the soot going through the engine, from the process of burning the diesel fuel. But this one's in pretty good shape. That, just thinking out loud, that kind of tells me that the rings are in pretty good shape, and that hopefully, fingers crossed, we shouldn't have any issues here. I'm going to let this drain. You want to let this drain for, as long as you can, 10, 15, 20 minutes. So while we're doing that, I'm just getting up here on top of the engine, taking off the oil cap, pulling the dipstick out. I'll bring you up here and show you in a minute the oil filter. The oil filter on these is up here on the top side of the engine. So it's a cartridge-style filter. I'll show you the difference here in a minute between a pretty common, just about everything takes spin-on filter and what a cartridge filter looks like. All right, so now we're back on top on the driver's side of the engine. I'm going to show you where the oil filter lives on this truck. It's right down here, this black plastic canister looking deal. That's where your oil filter lives on this. To get it off, you need a 28 millimeter oil filter socket. I guess you could use a regular 28 millimeter socket, but I bought this little guy on Amazon, $10 right around there, maybe less. So that's what I'm going to use. So I like to just come down here and crack the filter loose. It shouldn't be too tight. Oh, this one's tight. Oh, that one's tight. All right, hang on a minute, folks. Okay, so maybe it wasn't as tight as I thought. Once I got a regular ratchet, it broke loose pretty easy. So I'm just going to spin it out by hand now. Let it rest here for a second to drain all the oil that's trapped in there and in the filter. Let it drain down through and into the oil pan. These don't have to be very tight when you tighten them back up. They're sealed with an O-ring. All right, so there that is. Go ahead and pull it out. We're going to reuse this plastic lid, of course. Let me get you set up here a little bit better place. All right, so the filter just pulls out of this plastic cap. Like I said, we're going to reuse this plastic cap here in my hand. Obviously, we're going to put a new filter in it. So we can drain all the oil out of the cap. Look for anything crazy down in there, shiny stuff, or whatever. This is what a cartridge filter looks like. I'll show you again with the new one, but everybody's used to spin-on filters. the metal case filters like you probably have on your car. There's not a whole lot of stuff that uses these cartridge filters, but for whatever reason on this EcoDiesel, that's what they decided to use. I like to save these, let all the oil drain out of it, then I can look down here between the pleats and kind of see if I see anything in there. So I'm going to set this over in this other drain pan to let the oil continue draining out of it. Like I said, this is sealed with an O-ring, which is right here. I'm going to take a sharp pick. You can get the set of these at Harbor Freight for about $1. Real handy little tools to have. There's the O-ring that we're going to replace. Comes with your new filter. I'm going to lay that to the side for the moment too. I've had times in the past where, for whatever reason, there's something wrong with the new O-ring in the box, and you end up having to reuse the old one. So you don't want to throw it in the bottom of the trash can just yet. We'll get some towels, wipe this cap out. Got the oil all wiped out of this. Don't see anything crazy in it still. I'm going to clean it out with a little bit of brake clean. It's got some cracks and crevices down there in the bottom of it that you can't really get into with a rag. I'll take this over to the bench, turn it upside down where all that brake clean can run out and dry. And we'll put the new O-ring on it. All right, so we're going to get this new oil filter put in the new canister. I'll show you the difference here. I'm sure most people already know, but I'll show you the difference between one of these, which is a regular spin-on oil filter. Most cars use these, probably 90% use these. And this here is a new cartridge oil filter. Kind of saw the old one when we were taking it out of the canister, but here's the new one, a canister filter. So canister filters and spin-on filters, they do the same thing. It's just the way the manufacturer decides to build it for whatever reason. So new filter, like I said, it comes with a new O-ring. I like to use good quality filters, usually Wix, Motorcraft, AC Delco are usually good filters. Mopar filters are good, but they're really expensive. This is a fuel filter for this truck. It's a canister style also. That's going to be another video, so we're going to set that off to the side. So the new O-ring on the oil filter housing. I'll use my pick again to put it down on there. It goes in this groove right here. Okay. It looks like you could put it right here, but it don't go there. It goes in the grooves. Pretty self-explanatory when you get to looking at it. So I'll start it down on there, kind of roll it down into position. Now, I take my pick, and you want to go in at an angle where you're not poking into the O-ring. Okay, you don't want to go in like this because you'll end up cutting the O-ring. So you want to poke it in away from the O-ring and then kind of roll it around underneath. All right, get it underneath your pick like that, and all I'm going to do is go around the oil filter housing, lid, can, top. And what that's going to do is that's going to let that O-ring untwist and relax into position so that it'll seal. New oil filter just snaps down in the housing. You'll hear it click. There, you'll hear it click just like that. It should stay in there. Once you put it in and it snaps into place, it should stay in there and not fall out. Before we put this back in, we want to lube up the O-rings. There's an O-ring right here and the O-ring we just put on. You want to lube both of those up with engine oil so that they'll go back down into place without twisting, cutting, or anything like that. For oil, we're putting synthetic Rotella back into it, 5W40. That's what the manufacturer calls for in both weight and one of their recommended types of oils. So that's what we're going to put in it. AMSOIL is good oil. You can run that in it. If you look around on the internet about these EcoDiesels, they have kind of a reputation, I guess, of oil problems and the motor locking up. So I don't think it's a EcoDiesel thing. I think it's more people not changing their oil when they're supposed to, not checking it, running it low, and running into problems that way versus you can do everything perfect and it's just junk and it's going to lock up on you anyway. I don't believe that to be the case. So we've got that lubed up. We'll move back over to the engine, put it back in. As I said a minute ago, this plastic housing does not need to be very tight. I think the spec on it's 10 foot-pounds or something like that, not very much at all, just a little bit past hand tight. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, oil filter's all put back in. Clean off around the oil filter. When you get it put back in, clean the cap off, clean the area around it. That way, when you start the truck, you can see at the oil filter if you have any leaks. If you leave all that oil that spilled out earlier when you took it out, you're going to see oil. You don't really know if is it leaking or is that from before. So we've got all that done. It's time to go back underneath, put the drain plug back in, then we can fill it with oil. Okay, drain plug's back in. Started putting the oil in. I'm going to add Lucas to it, 20% like it's recommended on the bottle. Instead of pouring this Lucas in directly, what I'm going to do, I've left maybe 2 quarts of oil in this regular motor oil jug. So I'm going to take this Lucas, put it in with the regular motor oil. This Lucas is so thick, it takes forever to drain into the engine, just putting it in the funnel by itself. So I'm going to put it in this motor oil bottle, shake it up, and that'll make it a lot easier to pour into the engine. Let that sit there and drain for a minute. I'm going to do the same thing with this other jug. Okay, we've got all the oil put back in it. I usually like to check the oil level before I start it, just to make sure. It's going to show that it's over full right now. 1, because we've got the front end up in the air on ramps, and 2, because we haven't started it and filled up that oil filter yet. But I do like to check it just to make sure nothing crazy happened. I had a experience one time. I was working on a medium duty truck and I was in a hurry to get it done. Drained the oil, checking stuff, put the new oil filters on it, poured it full of oil. Luckily, I pulled the dipstick and there wasn't any oil on the dipstick. I know I put the right amount in it, so I look underneath. I forgot to put the drain plug back in the oil pan. So all that fresh oil I poured in the top ran right out the bottom. Thank goodness I had a big enough drain pan that it didn't make a mess on the floor. But it's a good habit to get into, just pulling the dipstick before you start it, just to make sure nothing crazy happened. We're going to go inside now, start it up, and watch for oil pressure to come up on the gauge. Okay, so we've got an oil pressure gauge up here in the dash, but we're also going to have numbers here in the center that will show us the oil pressure. There we got oil pressure on the gauge. Down here it shows we got 26 pounds right now. So now that we know we got good oil pressure, I want to come out here and look at this oil filter housing and just make sure that we don't have any oil running out of it anywhere, telling us that we cut that O-ring putting it in. Everything's nice and dry, so I know we're good there. Now we're going to back the truck down off the ramp, shut it off, and check the oil for real. All right, folks, that pretty much wraps it up. We've checked the oil level. It is right on the money. We've started it. We've ran it. We looked for leaks at the oil filter. All that's good. We topped off all of our fluids, checked our brake fluid, our power steering, our antifreeze, tire pressures, all that stuff checks out. The lights are all good. So that's pretty much the way I do a oil change / maintenance on a vehicle. If you do something a little different, put it in the comments. Let me know what you do or how you do differently than what I did. But I think that pretty much wraps up this video. If you liked it, please click the like button, subscribe, and hit the little bell so you get notified when we post new videos. I appreciate your support, your comments, and your criticisms very much. Thank you and have a great day.